The rain wasn't just rain, it was a cold, merciless downpour that soaked Penelope's simple dress in seconds. Each drop felt like a tiny needle, a sharp reminder of the hateful words they'd thrown at her. She stood on the slick pavement, wind whipping her hair across her face, and stared up at that glowing penthouse window. She could see their silhouettes moving gracefully, see the glint of champagne glasses. She could almost feel their smug satisfaction as they watched her, a lone figure in the storm. They felt powerful. But Penelope wasn't just shivering from the cold. A quiet fire was starting to burn inside her. She remembered her grandmother's words, "You carry a strength in your blood that oceans cannot quench." She hugged herself, trying to hold on to the dignity they had tried to strip away. As the storm raged around her, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of justice, and it was headed straight for their front door. Section 1, The Invitation and the Ambush. It all started with an invitation on heavy, cream-colored cardstock that felt both fancy and threatening. It was from the Golden Rose Society, a club of 6 of the city's most powerful women, or more accurately, women married to the city's most powerful men. Their unofficial leader, Beatrice van der Meer, a woman with hair as sharp and cold as her eyes, had invited Penelope herself. They'd had a brief, awkward chat at a city fundraiser. "You're the little librarian from the downtown branch, aren't you?" Beatrice had asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We're having a small gathering to plan a charity event. You should come. It would be good for you to see how things are done." Penelope knew right then it wasn't a real invitation. It was a test. Her husband, Frederick, had even warned her. "Penny," he'd said, his voice low with concern, "those women don't build bridges, they build walls. Be careful." But Penelope, always an optimist, wanted to believe she could connect with them. She thought that maybe, just maybe, a little human decency could cut through their ignorance. She chose her outfit carefully, a modest, deep blue dress that was professional and confident. It wasn't a designer label, but it was hers. When she arrived at the penthouse, a glass palace on top of one of the city's tallest towers, her stomach was in knots. The second she stepped out of the elevator, she could feel the mood shift. The 6 women were waiting, arranged around the massive living room like a pack of wolves, turning as one to watch her. "Penelope, you made it," Beatrice cooed, but her smile was all teeth. She waved a hand around the room. "You know everyone, of course. Tabitha, Eleanor, Madison, Claire, and Gwendolyn." The women gave her tight little smiles that looked more like grimaces. You could feel the judgment in the air as they scanned her. The dress, the simple hair, the lack of flashy jewelry. There was no charity planning in sight. Just champagne and untouched appetizers. It was an ambush. For the next hour, they put on a masterclass in cruelty, delivering it in 1,000 tiny cuts. They started with her job. "A librarian," Tabitha said out loud, swirling her glass. "How quaint. Do people still read actual books?" "It must be so rewarding," Eleanor added with a sarcastic edge, "to spend your days in all that dust and silence, with things no one wants anymore." Penelope just smiled politely. "I find books hold a magic that screens can't," she said softly. "They connect us to history, to ideas, and to each other. I feel privileged to be a guardian of that." Her calm, thoughtful answer just seemed to make them mad. They wanted her to crack. When her job didn't work, they moved on to her background. Beatrice brought up Penelope's Nigerian heritage with a clumsy, offensive curiosity. "Adebayo," she said, butchering the name on purpose. "That's African, right? So exotic. Was it a struggle to, assimilate?" "There was nothing to assimilate to," Penelope replied, her voice steady. "I was born and raised here, just like you. My heritage is a part of me, a source of pride, not a costume." But they wouldn't let up. Gwendolyn leaned in, a nasty gleam in her eye. "But your parents were immigrants, weren't they?" It's just so inspiring how people like you can pull yourselves up and find a place in the world. Even a humble one. That word, humble, was meant to be a dagger. They were trying to paint her as some charity case they had generously allowed into their world for a laugh. Penelope thought about Frederick, about the life they had built together on love and respect, a life these women, with all their money, could never understand. She held on to that truth like a shield. She wouldn't let their poison in. But her silence, her refusal to break, just made them angrier. They needed to see her fall apart. So, they decided to take it one step further. Section 2, the ejection. Just then, the storm that had been brewing outside finally broke. Rain started hitting the giant windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The weather seemed to match the dark mood in the room. Beatrice stood up, her face, once covered in a mask of politeness, now twisted into an ugly sneer. "I think this little experiment is over," she announced, her eyes locked on Penelope. "It's clear you don't belong here, Penelope. This world, it's not for you." Penelope stood up too, her heart pounding but her face calm. "You're right, Beatrice," she said, her voice clear. "It isn't." Her simple agreement, without any of the begging or anger they expected, seemed to throw them off. But only for a second. Beatrice's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Exactly. You're a librarian from a fantasy world. We live in the real world, a world you can't afford. You don't have the right background, the right connections, or the right look. And you came here in that dress," Madison added with a flick of her wrist, "thinking you could fit in. You can't just polish a rock and call it a diamond." The insults came from all sides, a chorus of condescension. "It was a mistake inviting you. You're making us all uncomfortable. This was for members only." The final move came from Beatrice. She walked to the huge front door and pulled it open, revealing a dark, rain-swept hallway. A cold spray of rain misted into the perfect foyer. "It's time for you to go," Beatrice said, her voice as cold as the storm. Penelope looked at their 6 faces, all lit up with a sick kind of victory. They were enjoying this. She could have argued. She could have screamed. She could have told them exactly who her husband was. But she knew words were wasted on them. The only thing they understood was power, and they just couldn't see hers yet. With a deep breath, she grabbed her purse and walked to the door, her head held high. As she stepped over the threshold, one of them gave her a small shove from behind. The heavy door slammed shut. She could hear their laughter through the thick wood. She walked to the elevator, her step steady. As she went down, she watched the city lights blur through the rain. On the street, the full force of the storm hit her. The rain soaked her instantly. Cars sped by, their occupants safe and dry inside. She shivered, not just from the cold, but from the pure hate she had just faced. She looked up at the tower, at the one lit window mocking her from the sky. The injustice of it all burned in her chest. They had taken away her comfort, but they couldn't touch her spirit. She fumbled in her purse for her phone, her fingers numb. She found the name and pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "Frederick," she said, her voice trembling just a little. "I'm downtown. It's raining, and they..." She couldn't finish. "I'm on my way," Frederick's voice came back, sharp with anger and concern. "Send me your location. Now." She sent the address and put her phone away. Then she just waited. She waited in the rain, a lone figure of defiance, as the women in the penthouse toasted their cruelty, completely unaware of the reckoning speeding toward them. CTA. They really thought the story ended there, with Penelope shivering in the rain. But true strength isn't about who has power in one single moment. What's the best way to stand up to bullies like this? Before we find out what happens next, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe that kindness and dignity are the ultimate strengths, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Section 3, The Arrival. Up in the penthouse, the women were practically drunk on their own cruelty. Getting rid of Penelope had made them feel powerful, superior. They gathered by the window, champagne in hand, to watch the storm. Did you see her face? Tabitha laughed. She was trying so hard not to cry. The way she just stood there and took it, Eleanor added. It was almost sad. Some people just don't know their place. Beatrice, their leader, stared down at the street with a smug smirk. She knows it now. We did her a favor. Now she won't get any more foolish ideas about climbing into a world where she doesn't belong. Then, a new pair of headlights cut through the rain. A car, impossibly black and silent, pulled up right in front of the building. It wasn't a taxi or an Uber. It was a brand new Tesla, a top-of-the-line model that costs well into 6 figures, a clear symbol of modern wealth and influence. Well, look at that, Madison said, intrigued. Who's out in this weather? From that high up, they couldn't see his face clearly, but they saw what he did next. He gently placed a hand on Penelope's shoulder, then took off his own expensive suit jacket and wrapped it around her. It was a gesture of such obvious care and protectiveness that it was unmistakable, even from hundreds of feet away. Who is that? Gwendolyn whispered, a flicker of confusion in her voice. Beatrice squinted, a frown forming on her perfect forehead. He looks familiar. The man led Penelope to the passenger side, held the door for her, and made sure she was settled in before getting back in the driver's seat. But the Tesla didn't leave. It just sat there, its lights cutting through the storm, an imposing, silent threat. A ripple of unease went through the group. The story they had told themselves, of the lowly librarian put in her place, was suddenly falling apart. The arrival of this man and this car introduced a variable they hadn't counted on, and it made them nervous. Maybe it's her boss. Claire suggested, but nobody believed it. The man had an aura of power they all recognized and respected. And he was here for the woman they had just thrown out. A cold knot of dread began to form in Beatrice's stomach. She had a terrible feeling she'd seen his face before, maybe in Forbes or the Wall Street Journal. The man now sitting in that car, carefully tending to the librarian they hated, for 5 long minutes, the Tesla just sat there. Inside the penthouse, the party was officially over. The champagne tasted flat. The nervous chatter died down as they all just stared down at the car. Then, the private elevator that went straight to the penthouse chimed. The doors slid open. And Penelope stepped out. She was still wearing the man's suit jacket, but she wasn't shivering anymore. Her hair was slicked back, her face was calm, and her eyes held a new, unbreakable strength. Beside her stood the man from the car. And now, under the bright lights of the penthouse, his face was unmistakable. It was Frederick Hamilton. The Frederick Hamilton. The tech billionaire whose company had changed the world. A man whose net worth was bigger than all of their husbands' fortunes combined. A legend in the city, known for being incredibly private and powerful. You could hear a collective gasp. The women froze, their faces a mix of shock, disbelief, and pure horror. They looked from Frederick Hamilton, the titan of industry, to Penelope, the humble librarian, and back again. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. This couldn't be happening. Frederick's sharp, intelligent eyes swept over the 6 women. He wasn't loud or angry. He was something much scarier. He was cold, analytical, and completely unimpressed. He looked at them like a man looking at a bad investment. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Good evening, ladies, he said, the politeness making his contempt even sharper. I believe you've met my wife. Your wife? Eleanor stammered. Penelope stood right beside him, his equal. The jacket over her shoulders looked like a royal cape. Yes, Frederick continued, his eyes locking onto Beatrice. Penelope Hamilton. My wife. The woman you just threw into a storm. The woman you mocked for her job, a job she loves and chose to do. The woman you insulted for her heritage, a heritage richer than you could ever understand. They were speechless, paralyzed by how badly they had miscalculated. Their arrogance had completely blinded them. But the final, devastating blow was still to come. And Penelope was the one to deliver it. She stepped forward, her voice no longer soft, but ringing with authority. You laughed at my job, she said, looking from one horrified face to the next. You called it humble. You called this building, this world, your own. But you made one critical mistake. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. You see, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, Frederick's company built this tower. His name is on the deed. And since we share everything, my name is on it, too. You aren't in your penthouse. You're in mine. The silence that followed was deafening. The truth hit them with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't just insulted a guest. They had insulted their landlord. In one terrifying moment, their entire world had flipped upside down. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it was destroyed. Conclusion and moral. What followed was a pathetic scramble of desperate apologies. Beatrice, the ringleader, was the first to break. Mrs. Hamilton. Penelope. We had no idea, she pleaded. It was all a terrible misunderstanding. A joke that went too far. Frederick put a protective arm around Penelope, his expression like ice. A joke, he repeated softly. Humiliating a woman and throwing her out in the rain, you find that funny? No. Of course not. We were just drinking, we weren't thinking. Tabitha chimed in, her face pale. Penelope looked at them with weary disappointment. Your apologies aren't for me, she said, her voice steady. Your cruelty wasn't just for me. It's for anyone you think is beneath you. You can start by apologizing to the security guard downstairs whose job you threatened just to feel powerful. His name is Marcus, and he deserves your respect. Frederick gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Then he delivered the final sentence with calm, businesslike authority. Considering my wife could have you all evicted with a single phone call, I suggest you do exactly as she says, he stated. And the security footage from the hallway will be sent to your husbands in the morning. I'm sure they'll be fascinated to see how their wives conduct themselves. The color drained from their faces. They knew what that meant. It wasn't just social ruin. It was a threat to the very foundation of their comfortable lives. Penelope and Frederick turned and walked back to the elevator, leaving the 6 women frozen in their gilded cage. On the way down, Penelope walked over to Marcus at his desk. Marcus, she said kindly. I am so sorry you were put in that position. The guard looked up, his eyes wide. Mrs. Hamilton, thank you. I didn't want to. I know, she said with a warm smile. You handled yourself with dignity. Thank you. As they walked back to the Tesla, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The storm had passed. As Frederick held the door for her, Penelope finally let out a long breath, a quiet sense of peace settling over her. The story of that night spread like wildfire. The Golden Rose Society fell apart. The women became outcasts, their fall from grace swift and brutal. They learned that the wealth and status they worshipped were fragile things. But the real story isn't about their downfall. It's about Penelope. She didn't celebrate their failure. She went on with her life as Penelope Adebayo Hamilton, a woman who loved books, valued kindness, and understood that a person's real worth has nothing to do with their bank account. The lesson here is a timeless one. Never, ever judge someone by their clothes, their job, or where they come from. Arrogance makes you blind to what people are really made of, and prejudice is a poison that only ends up hurting you. True strength is found in quiet dignity, in kindness, and in knowing your own worth. Because you never know when the person you look down on is the one who owns the building. Outro CTA. Thank you for joining us for this story. If Penelope's strength inspired you, please share this video with someone who needs this message. And don't forget to check out another one of our stories by clicking the video on your screen now. Until next time, remember to be kind, be strong, and never let anyone dim your light.